everyone, my name is Ms. Chen. Today we are going to work on retelling a story. Let's take a look at our learning objective. I can retell a story in sequential order. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. When you retell a story, you describe what happens in a story in order. That's what we were talking about before, sequential order. That means from the beginning to the middle to the end. And when you talk about the beginning, you will say first. When you talk about the middle, you will say next. And when you talk about the end, you will say last. So we are going to practice with this book, Young Frank Architect, that we just finished reading. And just a reminder, the genre or the type of book is realistic fiction. That means this story could happen in real life, but it was actually made up by the author. So it's my turn first. I am going to focus on the beginning of the story. And while I'm looking at the beginning, I'm going to try to answer these two questions. Who are the characters and what is the setting? And just a reminder, characters are the people or animals in a story, and the setting is the time and the place. And these are two different features that you will find in most realistic fiction texts. So let's go back to the beginning of the story again and see if we can answer these two questions. Who are the characters and what is the setting? Young Frank's apartment is on the top floor of this tall building. He is an architect. I think I know one character already. And the setting, he lives with his spotted dog Eddie and his grandpa, Old Frank, who is also an architect. So just by looking at this picture, I can see there's Old Frank, Young Frank, Eddie the dog, and they live in this apartment building. So I have the characters as well as the setting. So who are the characters and what is the setting? Well, we've got it already. Young Frank is an architect who lives with his grandpa, Old Frank, and his dog, Eddie, on the top floor of an apartment building. Old Frank is also an architect. So I'm giving you some information about the characters and the setting. And for this story, the setting is just the place. We don't know exactly when the story is taking place. Okay, now it's our turn to work together to figure out the middle of the story. And when we are looking at the middle of the story, we are going to answer these two questions. What happens to the characters, and is there a problem? Just a reminder, characters are part of realistic fiction texts, and in our book we have 3 of them. Old Frank, Young Frank, and Eddie. And problems are also usually in realistic fiction texts. So while we revisit the middle part of this book, let's see if we can find the problem. So one morning, Young Frank made a chair using toilet paper rolls. Said Old Frank, I don't think architects make chairs. And you can't really sit in this one, can you? Okay, let's keep going. He also made a skyscraper out of books. Buildings should be straight, said Old Frank, not twisted and wiggly. And finally, just before lunch, Young Frank designed a whole city. Said Old Frank, cities are made one building at a time and take hundreds of years. And at lunch, Young Frank said, Grandpa, I'm not sure I want to be an architect anymore. Said Old Frank. I know, let's go to the museum. I think it'll be very good for you to see the work of some real architects, don't you? So, did you find the problem in the story? What is going on with Frank and his grandpa? What happens to the characters? Is there a problem? We can use these images from the story to help you think of the answer. Pause the video here, think of your answer, and when you have your answer, click play. All right, welcome back, friends. I hope you were able to use the words and the pictures from the story to help you answer the questions. What happens to the characters, and is there a problem? There is a problem because young Frank does not think he wants to be an architect anymore. And in the very beginning of the story, we found out that he is an architect. So the fact that he doesn't want to be an architect anymore is definitely a problem. And this is because Old Frank keeps telling him that what he is doing isn't what architects do, such as making chairs and twisty buildings. So here's the detail from the text that I am using to help me figure out what is going on in the middle of the story. So let's continue with the end, and now it's your turn. And when we read the end, you are going to think of these two questions. What is the last part of the story, and how is the problem solved? In most realistic fiction stories, you will find the solution or how the problem is solved. So for this story, we will find the solution as well. And just a reminder, the problem is that he doesn't want to be an architect anymore. So now they are at the museum, and old Frank finds a wiggly chair designed by an architect. He also sees a twisted tower designed by an architect. Last, they see a whole entire model of a city designed by another architect. When they got home, old Frank said, architects really do make chairs and twisted towers and cities too. I guess I was wrong. That's okay, Grandpa, said young Frank. Even I don't know some things. So later on, they decide to build chairs and buildings that are twisted. They even made a building out of chocolate chip cookies for Eddie. And at the very end, when they were done, they had a whole city. Later that night, when young Frank was tucked in his bed, he felt a bit older, like a real architect. For his part, old Frank felt younger and a little wiser. What is the last part of the story, and how is the problem solved? Use these pictures from the last part of the story to help you out. Pause the video here to think of your answer, and when you are ready, click play. Welcome back, friends. Let's check your answer. Old Frank takes young Frank to the museum. That's a detail from the story. And they learn that architects actually do everything that young Frank does, like make chairs and twisty buildings. Another detail from the story. Young Frank feels like a real architect. So again, I'm taking some details from the words and the pictures of the story to figure out what happened at the end of the story. So let's put everything together and retell. Remember, we're using first for the beginning, next for the middle, and last for the end. First, young Frank is an architect who lives with his grandpa, old Frank, and his dog, Eddie, on the top floor of an apartment building. Old Frank is also an architect. Next, young Frank does not think he wants to be an architect anymore because old Frank keeps telling him that what he is doing isn't what architects do, such as making chairs and twisty buildings. Last, old Frank takes young Frank to the museum, and they learn that architects actually do everything that young Frank does, like make chairs and twisty buildings. Young Frank feels like a real architect. Let's review. When you retell, you describe what happens in a story in order from beginning to middle to end. And let's review how you will retell when you are reading your own realistic fiction text. First, read the story one time. Then you are going to reread the story and answer the questions as you go. So here are the questions again for the beginning, middle, and end. When you can answer a question, write it down in your own words. Use words and pictures from the text to help you. And last, put the different parts together to retell the story. All right, nice work, everyone. See you next time.